Hello. Well, it works for the third time, so you just need to keep trying, right? So, welcome to this session. We are recorded and we are on Zoom, so welcome people online as well. And be careful with your questions, because you are recorded. No, I'm kidding. So be spontaneous and let's have a nice discussion online and in the room as well. Welcome to this session. It's entitled Understanding Public Perceptions and Attitudes Using Data Science, but it goes beyond this topic, and it is part of the data-driven technologies for social sciences, which is one of the themes of CIVICA Research. Data-driven technologies for social sciences is a very cross-disciplinary field. So it bridges between hard sciences like mathematics, physics, computer science, and social sciences, and we are finding a common language to make a common contribution. You can see a list of projects that were financed through CIVICA Research within this topic, but being financed within this topic almost always means that they are financed also within another topic, being cross-disciplinary, interdisciplinary, working with colleagues from other fields that are also important to CIVICA. We will have the opportunity today to hear just about 3 of them. So there is too many to present all of them, but we have a selection of 3 representatives. So we will have Pedro Ramaciotti Morales with, it's not highlighted, but he will tell himself about the European Polarisation Observatory. We will have Lorenzo Lucchini from Bocconi University about emotions during the COVID pandemic. And we have Galit Ashkenazi, sorry, I was practicing. Ashkenazi-Golan from the London School of Economics with equilibrium stuff, prices, equilibrium and prices, further away from social media, but equally as interesting and relevant for the data-driven technologies for social sciences. I will also take this opportunity and tell that within data-driven technologies for social sciences, there is an ongoing series of events, seminars, bi-weekly, from 2001 on. Many of people in here had already the opportunity to present their work on this seminar series, which is online on Wednesdays every 2 weeks. And the audience is very welcoming. So we have 50, 60, 70, 80, or even more people attending these seminars from all over the world. So it is open, not only limited to CIVICA, and it's a great opportunity to present this cross-disciplinary work, and there is always interesting discussions developing. So the format of this session will be as follows. We will have the 3 speakers presenting the projects and their work that they did within this CIVICA research projects. We will have a few minutes to ask questions that are specific to the project at hand. We will continue with a discussion about the implications, the visions, the limitations, opportunities, challenges, everything that there is with respect to the topic that we all work on. And you will also be welcomed to contribute to this debate and also answer questions. So, Pedro, you are the first to speak.
Can you hear me? Okay, so thanks a lot to begin with to the organizers for inviting me to talk about this project, of which I'm very fond. So I will be talking, of course, about polarization-related research, but also about Okay. So it is very difficult then when you administer a survey to connect the answers to a user and then use the rest of the traces that you can observe from the user, right? So two broadly speaking, families of methods using social media data to infer opinions that you can then use in your study are being developed in the last year. So one is text-based methods, of course, and natural language processing, and the other is using interactional traces, so what people, who follows whom, what people are clicking, liking, things that you can represent and model in networks. So these two come with different challenges and opportunities. So text-based methods, I would say, are somewhat sensible, more sensible to planned answering when you're administering surveys. Then there's a question of how they might contain political traces, but also a lot of irony, sarcasm, and different and often convoluted forms of language and even logic, right? So, and finally, of course, when you're dealing with text, you're dealing with natural languages, so it is very difficult to have cross-national comparative studies, which is crucial for doing this kind of research at European scale. On the other hand, this other kind of methods, which is less known, I would say, it's by essence language independent, because following, subscribing, sharing is inherently language independent, so the methods are too. And they are less prone to strategic self-representation. For example, you don't expect people to check who you're following on Twitter. They normally stop at what you have written. So here, for example, are two very well-known examples just to leave you with an image of what I'm saying. So in the left, researchers have tried to map two different communities, Democrat-leaning, Republican-leaning communities, and try to map how different named entities appear in maps that make sense for the study. On the right, researchers have tried to look at follower networks, and from follower networks, estimate liberal conservative positions, and see who might be retweeting people depending on where they are on this scale. But in what I'm saying, you already see the main problem in trying to apply this to European fields of empirical fields, in that all of this kind of research strongly builds on research based on and applied to and best suited for the American political context through strong assumptions on the ideological structure of the data you're observing, meaning concretely that you're expecting to be able to trace people and position people on liberal conservative scales, which is here epitomized in a study I thought many of you might know about Bashki and others in Facebook managed to label and position a lot of content and a lot of people and see if the algorithm is providing diverse recommendations. But the problem is that, of course, in Europe, things do not work this way. So because we have different national settings, we have different cleavage structures and more contingent strategic political issues that might be changing the dimensionality of the political competition on which we would want to conceive the study. So left-right dimensions, but also others. And in what order of importance and how many would you want to include in the study. So I'm putting here an image that I think is very illustrative on a study in which researchers tried to understand the dimensionality of political competition using survey data. So some countries might appear to work as in the United States, suitable to be explored in a lot of studies with one dimension. But other countries would need more dimensions, for example, 2, 3, and which dimensions are depends on the particular setting you might want to look. It's different looking at election settings than looking at different social arenas, for example. So this project is built on a methodology in which we try to tackle this based mainly in three steps. So the first step is to try to identify the traces on which we think we might obtain political signals. So for example, we do a lot of follower network analysis or subscription on YouTube analysis and trying to connect populations, individuals on one population on traces that would tell us something politically. Then we produce inference on spaces that preserve political properties. For example, We produce an embedding that would preserve homophily, that would explain the traces that we observe. And finally, we use a survey on political competition on the particular national setting to try to adapt what we know in these spaces about and match it with the political context of the country at hand. So this looks more or less like this. I know that I'm saying something that merits more details, but I cannot give it now. But for example, we would take a social graph, so a follower graph on Twitter, then produce an embedding on which we could say that people are close together would share something, and we would determine how many dimensions are required to explain the traces we observe, and then we would match those with a survey in which some of these entities have known positions in scales that are meaningful for understanding the dimensions that explain political competition in the country. So for example, here I'm going to show an example in the next slide. So here, for example, is an embedding of a large population of Twitter users in France in a left-right scale, and a scale of attitudes towards elites and institutions, and a scale of attitudes towards nationalism. So this project is a project about scientific findings using this kind of data by also building a network of interdisciplinary researchers using them for different purposes. So this is a project that we did together with, of course, Sciences Po, LSE, Bocconi, and CEU. And in that we build these data sets, build infrastructure to share them, and then allow for collaborative research to unfold. So by comparison also with surveys, another thing to be noted is that, of course, these are not representative of online populations, readily at least, but that they have the huge advantage that we then can connect the information of political positioning we have on users of these large populations with all the rest of the traces. What they have commented on YouTube, what they have shared on Twitter, for example, etc. So we are doing research on a lot of disciplines, from computer science, political science, sociology, and we are tackling quite a lot different questions, so I would like to maybe brush on that very quickly. But just to give you an idea, we're dealing with theoretical questions. So for example, questions of what does it mean for polarization to be conceived and operationalized in multiple dimensions, things such as I mentioned, the dimensionality, how many dimensions do we need, and what do traditional conceptions of polarization mean in these multidimensional spaces, and questions about how polarization then relates to cohesion or fragmentation of online communities. In the more case study side of the project, we have dealt with research tackling things such as democratic backsliding, for example, analyzing dimensions on attitudes towards authoritarianism that we can observe in some countries. Questions regarding algorithmic auditing, so we can now look at positions of users and positions of items that are being recommended, which is very useful in auditing. Things related to polarization-driven misinformation and agenda setting, and maybe here I can maybe take the opportunity to talk about just one result that we have. So there, as you know, in misinformation research, there are two main hypotheses being put forward. One is putting more emphasis on individual traits, data literacy, education, reflectiveness, and there are other more focused on systemic traits, for example, polarization. How does polarization explain, to what degree, the propensity for people to share misinformation, which is all well and fine operationalized in the United States, but what does it mean, polarization in different European settings, is something that we try to address in this project, and here I want to leave you with this figure in which we positioned a large population of Twitter users in France. We spatialized them on the two dimensions that we thought we found to be the most explicative of this population, which is left-right positions and attitudes towards elites and institutions. And then, because we were able to get URLs flagged as misinformation, we were able to make a representation of the propensity in this two-dimensional space for sharing misinformation. So in the United States, the conclusion is kind of asymmetrical. So the more you are to the right, the more you have higher probability of sharing misinformation. So here we show that the picture is more complex. It depends on left-right polarization, of course, but it needs to be modulated by this second dimension that is also very explicative of these environments online in Europe. So let me talk about a little bit, just to finish, about results that are not purely scientific, but institutional too. So we've been able to publish in very central outlets in different disciplines. So for example, we have published in the RecSys conference, which is a computer science conference on recommender systems, and also in party politics. So this tells you a little bit of the breadth of the collaborations that we are able to weave within the project with this kind of data. We've also been able to, through CIVICA, to build the infrastructure, meaning the machines and the protocols for, and the institutional protocols, meaning, for example, you know that we're talking about here political positions, so we're talking about DPO, GDPR, and a lot of issues that are very difficult to tackle outside efforts such as this one within CIVICA. We've also been able to transform these results within the CIVICA project into different projects that are already helping us build, for example, with the Data Intelligence Institute of Paris, computational open tools, and of course, additional projects that will help us sustain the efforts we have done, such as an Horizon project that we recently obtained, and others that we're planning on submission. So I mentioned already that we are building computational tools. This is something that is maturing and is reaching already a lot of collaborators at all levels that we have been able to onboard in the project, from postdoc, faculty, but also PhDs and master's theses that we've been able to fund through this project, and that have been essential in weaving and fostering this not easy collaboration between disciplines and institutions, right? So thanks for allowing the time for this project. And I just want to say that we are very excited about the future, in which we plan to keep working on this because of the effort we have been able to do within the CIVICA project, to a level in which we can have sustainability of the infrastructures, the institutional practices that we need, and of course, the engagement of research and students. Thanks.
Thank you, Pedro. This was super impressive, and probably saying that all of it was done within a CIVICA research project is a bit of an overstatement. Was it? I believe it is a continuous work that's going on for more than the last year. Yeah? But congratulations, and we would like to, for you and for all of us, for you to continue, because this brings insight into very important topics. Are there any questions for Pedro at this point? Yes?
Hi, I missed the very beginning, but I was in the previous session in this room which talked about migration projects, and one of the missing link that I saw, especially in the Merita project, and also another project led by SNSPA, I think, looking at the party politics and the manifestos of different parties that they collected. I think around 210 party manifestos they're looking at to understand polarization. So what was missing there was how misinformation and new media and data is actually driving those attitudes and behaviors towards migration and European integration. So it's just a comment to say that there's a lot of correlation between these projects. So I think we need to connect the dots in our heads and find ways for you to collaborate with the other thematic projects in CIVICA. And this methodology you just presented, I think, will add value to the others who are already building a massive project that they will apply to an external funder. So I think we need to do some backroom management ourselves as well to see how we can connect that. But I just would like to suggest if you would be kind of to talk to the Merita project colleagues, Lawrence Romani, who is in the other room, later at the lunchtime. That will be great. I just saw an excellent correlation.
Yeah, thank you for your comment. That leads me to some additional information. So when we talk about matching attitudes using surveys that tells us about cleavages that are particular to countries or things related to strategic competition, the surveys, what they contain are sometimes tens of dimensions. Not all, of course, can be thought of impacting actually what people are doing. So But most of times, some of the dimensions of which you're speaking to, for example, questions of European integration, attitudes towards religious principles, towards immigration, sometimes we are able to pick on them, to pick them up from the signal and being able then to validate them, which is of course very important in creating data set that people can then use. Yeah, so this is my main comment. Thanks.
Thank you, and we will have you will have opportunities with this CIVICA event to speak to the Merita project and also other people who might be interested. Please approach Pedro or everybody else in the audience. Other questions? Yes.
Thank you for the presentation. This was really insightful. I was curious, kind of, given that you are approaching the end of the research project itself, what do you see as sort of your future working areas? Have you identified what will you be focusing on sort of in the aftermath of this CIVICA period?
So speaking from the standpoint of the project, the scope is very diverse and broad. It's very difficult to say we're focusing on one thing. So for example, right now we have declared users, researchers using this data in the 15-20, so that we have people working on things more related to cultural sociology things, such as boundaries in creating identities in these spaces, people working more on the network science kind of approaches to this. There are colleagues of Petra, for example. So there's a huge diversity within the project, which is, I think, what's interesting about it.
Other questions at this point? Okay, so we will save the best for later. We have our second speaker now. Please.
Thank you. Okay, so I will use a lot of stuff that Pedro already said to introduce this project, which is called EmoMap, and is focused on mapping emotions during the COVID-19 pandemic. So the idea here is that with the collaborators we have, the idea was spurred actually in front of this graph, which is the curve of the Italian daily death during the first 2 years of the pandemic. And we were asking ourselves, okay, this is something we actually measure. This is a state we can, everyone can agree on, but can we actually ask ourselves, how were we feeling at the beginning of the pandemic? And I'm sure if we ask, this is the case for Italy, and we started with hard lockdown at the very beginning, and so I can say with some confidence that most of us will remember how she was feeling in that period. But then can we also try to answer how were we feeling like 1 year later? And probably most of us actually do not really remember what was going on there, because you know, we got used to the situation or lots of things changed. And so the idea here is really, can we see or can we use the state of something we can measure and agree on, all agree on, to, you know, understand what's the effect or what are the responses that individuals are taking in response to this state. So the idea here is that we use, again, the textual part of Twitter data, in the sense that we take the text from tweets to build and infer the emotions of individuals. So here, of course, as Petra anticipated, there are some pro that you have a large data set when you speak about Twitter, but you also have a lot of caveats you have to keep in mind. So I have myopia, I'm getting closer because otherwise. So the first one, of course, is that you can use this data to infer, for example, or try to make better policies. This is something very interesting. You can also try to nowcast. So if you are able to, as tweets are published, if you are able to infer the emotion that individuals are exchanging one another, you can nowcast if there are, for example, potential issues going on. And you can link also those to and ask yourself, are there any impediments to, for example, compliance to regulation, which is very relevant for the COVID-19 cases, for example. But of course, the caveats we have to keep in mind, and as Pedro said, is that Twitter is biased. In Italy, there is less than 7% of the eligible population on Twitter. So it's really a small sample of the population, and moreover is non-representative. There are known bias, for example, income-based, but also gender-based. We are able to remove some of them with standard statistical methods, but not all of them. And this is really work in progress. And of course, there is also the fact that when you deal with Twitter, you have tweets are produced also based on the interests individuals have on some topics. And so if you look at, for example, at the number of tweets that were produced within the coronavirus discussion, of course, at the beginning you have a huge number of tweets, but after 1 year you almost lose interest in discussing this matter on Twitter. And so you have to take this into account, that attention is going away. So the data collection, I will go very fast on this. All the data were collected through the Twitter Academic API, which is history right now. So we will, as a researcher, we have really to find new ways to collect and share data, and the work Pedro is doing is really something in this direction. And about more specifically to what we collected 7 keywords on a 2-step keyword selection with a 2-step keyword selection method over almost 2 years of the first 2 years of the pandemic. And at the end, we have, let's say, almost 10 million tweets from more than 700,000 different accounts. So a first interesting approach is to look at the demographic of this data, but usually, of course, when you get this data, you don't have this data, so you don't have this information, so you want to enrich this tweet information, and you have 2 levels with which you can enrich this data. The first one is at the account level, and we managed to add age, gender, and location, but you can also add information at the tweet level. So what is that tweet talking about? What is the emotion that the individual posting is sharing with this tweet? And so we enriched our data with this information, which practically consists, you take a tweet, you have a user, you have some time, and then you enrich it with, on one side, demographic information, and on the other side, with structured information about the tweet you have. Okay, we do this using affiliate, which is an adaptation of the standard BERT model for emotion inferring, and we end up with 4 different motion, 5 different topics of discussion, different age groups, genders, and also geographical informations. So, as I was saying, it is per se interesting looking at the demographic of this discussion about coronavirus, and here you can see that we have different categories. For example, whether an account is an organization or whether it's not, so it's an individual, and you see that there is a huge difference in these quantities. For example, one striking is, as we were mentioning before, that there is a far greater proportion of male posting on Twitter than women, and also you have quite few organizations which are working on Twitter. And if you compare this with their activity, so how many tweets they produce, you can see that and compare with the proportion of the accounts and see that, for example, organizations are posting a lot more than individuals, and that makes sense, of course. But you can also see that females are posting less than what you would expect, simply based on the proportion of accounts. And so these differences should be taken into account when drawing conclusion from what is, for example, the dominant emotion within a population. And we can do this, for example, for different topics, and see how the different topics are discussed among different demographic groups. As you can see, for example, organizations are really talking much more about economics than they are doing about vaccine, probably because they do not want to get involved in the vaccine discourse, while on the contrary, you have male, for example, which are, people with more than 40 years old that are talking about economics more than younger people. But you can do this by topic, but you can also do this by emotion. And so what you see is that you have organization with, on average, they have like an higher tendency to share joyful tweets, while in contrast you have, for example, individual accounts which are most often sharing anger sentiments. And this is relevant because the population is actually the non-organizational account. And about the temporal evolution, so another question we posed was, are there differences between groups in sharing their emotions? And does these differences changes over time? There might be an exogenous event which affect the expressed emotion on Twitter, and this might affect different groups, different demographic groups over time. And so here you can see, for example, the plot of how over time organizations are sharing joyful tweets or positive sentiment tweets, and how instead the non-organizational one are sharing it. As you can see that over time there is this consistent behavior that organizations are sharing more positive sentiment tweets. And you can do the same by region, for example. Whether in Italy we have, let's say that we have differences based on the geographical areas people live in. And so it's also interesting to look at, are there differences in emotions shared based on the place you are tweeting for, you live in. And so for individuals, for non-organization, we see that there's no difference almost for every topic, and this is consistent over time. But when you look at organization, for example, you have differences between how organizations share and discuss the different topics, with organizations from north and center being more positive than those from south. And you can do this, of course, for all the demographic groups you have, and you can see consistent difference. The important point taken here is that we do not find any significant exogenous event affecting in different manners any of these different groups. This might be because of the biases we still have in the dataset. In particular, I was referring about the income bias. We were not able to infer socioeconomic status, for example, from tweets, but that's something which we are working on, and I think also Pedro is working on. But it's something that might really affect the points you draw from these results. So it's really something we should keep in mind as scientists and as social scientists in particular. Another important output of this project was, as Petra was mentioning, providing resources to the outside and to other researchers and to also the population if interested. So one of the crucial part was to develop a dashboard that could provide people with numbers and a better understanding of what was happening there. So you can actually use that QR to go and see the dashboard yourself. There's a lot of things you can see in here. In particular, for example, you can look at the prevalence of emotions over time for different Italian regions. And and the other really important thing is that we managed to aggregate data and we made them downloadable if you want to do research on those. So if you are interested and if you want to reach out, please feel free to contact me. And if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer you.
Thank you, very interesting. Thank you very much for the talk. I just wanted to ask you how you inferred the socio-demographic factors, because it's not really clear to me.
How we inferred the demographic?
Like male, female, age groups.
So you basically have two components. You have the biography, which is self-reported information by the account, and you can use that. And you also have, for example, and there you have locations, and you have some structured metadata when you use Twitter data. And so most of account information was taken from there. And so we use this, I think it's standard BERT model processing. You also pass the name, you have dictionaries, which tells you in Italy this name is related to a specific gender and stuff like this. And that's also true for the age, for example. And the region, you have self-reported locations in your biography, and you also have locations associated with tweets. So we are binding together those information. So the actual geolocation of tweets is like 2% of the tweets, so it's very low. We managed to retrieve 30% of locations for the users, and we bind these two information together, and we draw a larger area around those points. So it's not super precise, it's at the province level, but I mean, it's, that's it. I would say that regional is the one we are doing worse. So it's 30%, it's not that much.
Okay. Other questions?
Thank you, Lorenzo, for this presentation. Very interesting. I was asking myself if you plan to do, or perhaps you already have done, some analysis on tweet versus retweet, which is related to something that Pedro showed. If there are any differences on this in terms of emotions people are showing.
So, I mean, that's an interesting part. So Pedro was mentioning the connections and how to reconstruct those types of relation. We focused only on tweets first because retweets does not add any content. So you don't have more textual information. So the emotion you will infer will probably, I mean, not probably, will be the same as the one that was contained in the tweet. So that might be different from quotes, but quotes also have shorter text usually. And so you get, I mean, it's you get worse in predicting what's the actual emotion if you have shorter tweets length. But that's, of course, something super interesting. Here in this project, we focused only on tweets because we actually wanted to infer how people, wanted to share their emotional status. While retweets is, I don't know, some people from social scientists would say it's more slacktivist approach. So you just, you don't produce any content, you don't share anything that's yours, you just reshare something that was produced from someone other.
Yes?
Thank you for your insightful speech. I'm a graduate student from SNSPA, and actually I want to ask something quite specific about the methodology and the method, because I was doing some kind of similar research before, and I feel it really hard to to give a definition of the emotion. For example, if there's like sarcastic expressions that literally say the opposite thing or express the opposite opinions just to increase the like radical feeling about something. How do you manage those data, and how do you like exclude the influence of this data to make your research more concise and precise about the like predictions or the conclusions? Thank you.
So if I got the question in all its essence, so we focused on tweet, and as people answer to tweets or report tweets or comment tweets, there is when you actually polarize more and more, and there is when it gets more difficult to predict, for example, actual emotion or whether you're actually answering to someone, so just to oppose to a different opinion. So you don't have answer to any, I mean, you're not answering with the data we collected, we are not including any information about answer or relational behavior. Okay, so you are not opposing to anyone because you're just posting your tweet within the Twitter platform. From the methodological perspective, it's a standard Umberto model, which is like the adaptation of a BERT model for the Italian. And I mean, that's it. But if you like, yeah. I mean, if you want to talk about the details more later, I'm available. But if I misunderstood the question, please ask it again.
So the question, the way I understood it, was about sarcasm. How do you deal with that? With somebody saying, "Oh, that's a wonderful news." How do you deal with something like that?
Okay, yeah, sure. We are not dealing with that. We are not dealing with that in this sense. And among the emotion we are considering, The sarcasm, of course, is not included. We are just including joy, anger, and sadness, and so that's. I feel, in my perspective, if I have to, if you have a multidimensional representation of emotions, sarcasm is a way in which you express emotion, and you might be missing something if you forget. I mean, if you don't include that in your data. And we are not doing that, so we might be wrong about something.
There is still research to be done in the field of sarcasm. Yeah. I've encountered it myself. Yes?
Thank you. This is just a very simple question. I think this is quite fascinating, but my work isn't in Italy, so I was wondering whether you were planning on doing this on other countries as well, so for a broader European scope.
Yeah, originally yes, and we have we had a collaboration with CEU, in fact, which was aimed at developing tools also for Austria and Hungary, but we didn't manage to download the data in time, so because now the API is closed, we are kind of rethinking what to do now. The original idea, yes, it was it.
Yeah, thank you. And let's talk about the crisis of data in the discussion later. Galit, it's your turn. So let's switch to another topic, huh?
Yeah. Just if you do the same in the UK and you had an example where somebody says, what a nice day, and the topic is not, it's the weather that they're talking. It's a joint work with the Bocconi and Stockholm School of Economics. I'm from LSE, I'm from London. And I came without slides, and I will explain this radical behavior in a moment. But then you do need to look at something, so I'll move a little bit so that you don't get very, very bored. And the reason why I chose this living on the edge presentation without slides, we have slides. We've presented this project many times, but the slide is mainly about the small technical details. And I thought that maybe this is a good opportunity to talk more about what is the context of what we're doing, and also what we want to do in the future. And I wanted to take advantage of the fact that this audience is slightly different than the typical audience of my talk. So, and maybe it would generate new connections and new cooperations and inspire us or inspire you, I don't know. So this is about multi-agent reinforcement learning and game theory. I come from mathematical game theory. This is a little bit of hardcore analytic topic. I do repeated games, stochastic games, games with imperfect monitoring, incomplete information, very theoretical. I got to LSE 2 years ago, and I was kind of hungry to try something new and something that communicates somehow better with modern thinking. And all the issue of AI, of course, has risen again and again. And for most people, when we say AI, they usually think of ChatGPT, but that's not all that AI has to offer. And reinforcement learning, in fact, it's been around for ages. It's not something so new. Theory has been around from, I don't know, the 50s or even way before that. It's just that it became more and more approachable and for many applications, and the neural networks make all the computations quicker, and then this ability is harnessed more and more in different areas to deliver. So what is reinforcement learning? What is one-agent reinforcement learning? And what is multi-agent reinforcement learning? And why should we care about that as a society? So one-agent reinforcement learning is a simple heuristics or a simple set of rules where a player or somebody who tries to get some kind of utility, they make an action, they observe the result of the action, and they try to improve. Okay? So there can be many methods for that. You can kind of accumulate your results in one table. This is called Q-learning. Or you can try to make some kind of computations of what is the direction that is best to go, or I believe is best to go from here, and then change your choice of action slightly towards that. This is basically gradient learning in mathematics. And there can be more. You can involve neural networks. You cannot involve neural networks. There are many ways to do reinforcement learning. If you need to have an example in your mind, I mean, where do we meet that in day-to-day life? Now, a lot of it has to do with pricing. For example, pricing of hotels, pricing of flights, and other pricing of petrol in Germany, other issues. The mic? Is it better? Okay. So this is one-agent reinforcement learning, and the theory of that has been developed for a while, although we see lots of recent developments because it's been used more frequently. The kind of domains that are involved in this research, we have people from computer science, we have people from mathematics and game theory, we have people from economy, and also a little bit from other domains. Again, I come from game theory, so just a few words about game theory, and then you'll see where it kind of comes together with reinforcement learning. So in game theory, you probably know, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's a mathematical analysis of strategic interaction. So it means that we have more than one agent typically, and they make their decisions, they take their actions, and then the resulting payoff, reward, utility is of the combined actions, the combined decisions taken by them together. Okay. So if we have one agent employing reinforcement learning, the analysis is kind of well developed. We know a lot. When we have several agents simultaneously doing reinforcement learning, they interact. Okay, so this is a game theory in some sense model. And the learning process gets very complicated and messy. Why is that? Suppose that there are two bodies that are competing over prices or setting prices for something. One of them is setting prices, and then they observe what's happening, and then they take some change in the prices based on what they observe. But when they set the prices, their opponents set the prices simultaneously at the same time. And the resulting payoff that I got, the demand that I saw, the amount of sales that I had, it depends not only on my action, but also on my opponent's actions. Now, if I am learning and they are learning simultaneously, then what I am learning is affected by their actions, and what they are learning are affected by my actions. So if we employ these simple heuristics, what can we expect that would happen? Does it converge to something? Does it go anywhere? Under what conditions? What can be said about multi-agent reinforcement learning? Again, became interesting for obvious reason in the last decades. Now we have computer scientists, and they've been doing lots of simulations. They've also done mathematical analysis, but mainly they concentrated on zero-sum games. So these are games where the incentives of the players are completely opposing, and potential games. Potential games are the opposite. Games where more or less all the players want the same things. They are kind of in line in their incentives. Everything that is in between, so if you need to have an example in mind, think Prisoner's Dilemma. I'm guessing it's the celebrity of game theory. So it's not zero-sum, and it's not really a potential game. We can think, if Prisoner's Dilemma repeats itself, we can think of situations where the players end up cooperating, or we can also think of situations where they end up not cooperating. So what's going to happen? Okay? So this is multi-agent reinforcement learning. And within our group, we have several projects that we began thanks to the CIVICA funding. The first one is to try to attempt to find out whether machines can learn, so whether algorithms can learn how to play a very complicated game from a mathematical point of view. The complicated game is a pricing game, and it runs for 25 periods. And so there are, say, two firms, and they set prices for 25 periods. But what complicates this game is that there is interdependency of the demand between the periods. Meaning, whatever sales I'm going to see tomorrow depends not only on the price that I set tomorrow, but also on the prices that I set yesterday. So the complication. So theoretically, analytically, you can begin from the end of the game and kind of work your way up to the top, but you know that theoretically you can do that with chess, but nobody can do that. It's too large, okay? And it took a while to understand that machines can play chess pretty well. Can they play this game pretty well? So So that was our first project. We started by trying to train our agents, the players, in many different ways. We did Q-learning, we did gradient, we did this, we did that, we did Oracle, many types of learning. We found out that A, it's very difficult. It takes forever. We also find out that at least for some learning methods, we slightly lack resources because you need really heavy machinery. So now we're working on that. We got some machinery from LSE. Let's see what happens there. We learned a lot about learning. This is true. And we learned that there is a huge difference between different machineries and different learning styles. We learned that they are learning. So the machines are learning, but we are still uncertain about how quickly they're learning, whether the place where they end up is actually Nash equilibrium, what we call some kind of stable solution of the situation. So this is one project that we had. We still don't have all the results for that. We have some slides about things going this, going there, but honestly, we are still working on that. This is one project that we have. Thinking about it, we came across a paper by Calavano and another author that is sitting here in the crowd. And this is a simulation paper that inspired a lot of discussion among the theory people. And it goes like that. If you take several agents and you let them play a repeated pricing game, so without the interdependency complication that I just introduced. They just set prices and they see the sales that they have. Now I'm going to pause and make a small remark about game theory and how the theory relates here. In game theory, we know that if a game happens once, then we have the set of what we call Nash equilibria. It's typically a small set, finite number of stable solutions. But if a game repeats itself, this changes the picture completely. If a game repeats itself infinitely many times, then it gives rise to the possibility to incentivize desired behaviors by future threats, promises. You behave nice today, I'm going to behave nice tomorrow, and so on. And then there is a richness, there is plethora of possible equilibria payoffs. The professional term is the Folk theorem, but generally it says a lot can happen. The Folk theorem tells us a lot can happen. Many payoffs can be the result of an infinite interaction between players. Some people don't like the Folk theorem because when we say many things can happen, then we kind of lose the predictive power of a theory, right? If we want to treat it as a predictive thing and we say anything can happen, well, tell me something new, of course anything can happen. But still, it does indicate how rich a repeated interaction can be. And typically, the way that we say that anything can happen is to say something like, let's show that this can happen, that this is the payoff that the players can get as an equilibrium payoff. How do we do that? They're going to play what they're supposed to be playing to get to that payoff. And if somebody deviates, if somebody does not live up to the contract that we just decided this is what we're going to play, we're going to punish him. Okay, we're going to play something that will lower the payoffs for a few number of periods, and then we're going to go back to our agreement. Okay, there's going to be a sanction for that. And what they realized in that paper is that when you get players to play a repeated pricing game, this type of phenomena can happen. Now, I come from the theory of these things, and when we present them things like, yes, you play this, and then you deviate, and then you get punished, people were like, you know, nobody's going to play that. I mean, that's way too complicated. People don't think this way. Machines apparently might. Okay, they might think this way. And if they think this way in a pricing game, or if they might think this way in a pricing game, then it means that machines that were just designed to maximize profit might end up colluding without anybody telling them to collude. Okay, it's not a bunch of conspiring CEOs sitting in a room full of smoke of cigarettes. No, it's just a very kind of innocent way of using artificial intelligence. You find the prices that work best for the firm, and the other machine finds the prices that work best for the firm, and they end up finding prices that might be best for them, but not very best for the society. Okay, so there is a link of the things that we know from the theory of game theory and the things that are beginning to emerge from multi-agent reinforcement learning. And the other projects that we have are looking into the theory of that. Is it likely that they will collude? What type of learning machinery enables it more easily? What happens? In other words, what happens when several agents use simultaneously reinforcement learning techniques in general games that are not zero-sum and that are not necessarily potential games? Now, the thing that I think there are many things that can be done about it, and a lot of it, some of it, not a lot of it, we began to do. So we have some analytic results that we presented in the summer about convergence of multi-agent reinforcement learning, specifically projected gradient and the relationship, the connection to the fault theorem and the repeated interaction. This is one thing. But we're also looking for interesting games, interesting strategic interactions that have strong motivation from econ, from social sciences, from other places, to try to apply our machinery and our knowledge to. Okay, so if you have in mind any very interesting strategic interaction, please tell us, because we're happy to experiment. We're happy to check, okay? What happens if within this game we use this or that? What enables that kind of behavior, another type of behavior? What is the advantage of equipping your machine with memory, of allowing it to observe more or to observe less? Okay, there are many things to play with and lots of things to discover. I don't know where I am with time, which is kind of...
Let's wrap up.
Okay, so I guess this is the message. From math to computer science, to econ, to social sciences, I think this is truly an interdisciplinary kind of topic, and I'm happy to have afterwards a conversation about whatever thing you have in mind that might relate to that. Thank you.
Are there questions at this point?
Thank you so much for this presentation. I have very basic background, so sorry if the question might sound too stupid. But speaking of areas, thank you. If you think about it, of where this could be applied, what's your perspective on using it in corruption research and corruption investigations? So let's say there is a lot of public procurement data that is now being made available across different EU member states, I think, with the EU regulations requiring national bodies to publish it. So maybe also the impact on, let's say, the behavior of businesses that are politically connected and not politically connected, and let's say countries that are prone to corruption. If you think about Hungary, so for us in the context of CU, there is a lot of research in the big data area that is going on, but I was wondering whether this might be kind of a better way to approach it, in the sense that then you see not only how the politically connected firms behave, but also the ones that are out there in the market but don't have any connections, and whether they readjust their behavior. Because there, perhaps, again, people do not take this interdependency into consideration, but they still don't apply the automation, right? Okay. And they still don't do that, as opposed to, let's say, booking.com or whatnot, right? Yeah. So whether this would even be useful.
So I will answer this smart question with two answers. The first one is directly about your question, meaning what is the way to research data? I mean, I'm not a data scientist researcher, but if you look at data, there is often a way to find out whether we have some evidence of strategic interaction and interdependencies between periods. And there are researchers that did that in the past. If you want to involve machine learning and what happens when you apply this type of algorithms, then I know one paper that looked into the petrol prices in Germany. There was a period of time when when firms had more and more access to this type of algorithms, and they tried to figure out what was the effect on the prices and the resulting prices, and their finding is that prices increased, at least in some sense. So there is some kind of new evidence. Of course, nobody can say it's because of that or not. Causality, well, this is a thing that you know better than me. Causality is a complicated thing. But there is some trace of evidence to say that indeed when this is employed heavily by the industry, and I think they might even use the same type of algorithm, then yes, we might find that prices are not the competitive prices that maybe would have prevailed in other scenarios.
Thanks a lot for the presentation. I have so many questions, technical things to ask you, but I don't want to derail your excellent presentation for this hard stuff. So in the examples of pricing that we both studied, is cooperation is bad, generally, right? For society, it's really bad because it means that if machines cooperate in setting high prices, as consumer, we're going to pay high prices, which is not good for us, right? So, but there are plenty of other environments strategic environments, where cooperation is actually good. Yeah. Right. So, did you came across, studied, or so? Do you have some experience on that? So I've heard about. So, a similar environment is autonomous machines, cars in the streets, right? That's a problem of cooperation.
You want them coordinated.
Exactly, exactly.
So them not collisioning.
Yes, exactly. So, did you explore this type of environments?
Not yet. Okay, so we're going back to my restrictions. I'm a theoretic. I come from math. I need a stylized model to work on. But if you have an idea for a stylized model for cars that are learning, and yes, and it's not a potential game, then yes, we're very happy to look into that. The pricing game, yes, the pricing game, of course, is a metaphor, just like Prisoner's Dilemma. It's a metaphor. You can use it to many things. Prisoner's Dilemma, yes, it's as if the prisoners are cooperating, which is bad for the police, but you can also think of environmental issues as, the same metaphor applies, and just saying that each agent choosing the action that's best for them ends up being worse for society as a whole. Very easy. I mean, if you think a minute, you've come up with gazillion examples for that. So saying, the moral judgment is a little bit away from the theoretical, because you can take the numbers and then plug different stories that would mean different moral consequences for the same set of numbers. This one is good and this one's bad. Yes. Thank you.
Other questions? I have one. So your models are purely theoretical, or do you at the end have some data and say, like, because of what we observe, we are now in that scenario? Is there any relationship to the physical at the end?
So the only paper that I know that used real-life data was the one I mentioned about the petrol prices in Germany. Maybe there are more that I'm not aware of, or I'm pretty sure somebody out there is doing something, but I don't know. Again, an open call for this lovely audience. If somebody has some ideas about, because you need to have a situation where, in real life, where agents are using this type of machinery that was not previously used in an amount that is easy to assume that might affect some results that are observable from a statistical point of view. So you need it to be employed, and then you need to be able to collect data that might be affected by. Then you can say, look, from the beginning, when they began to use that, look at, well, we will have prices, but maybe other things, number of car accidents. Look at it here, look at it there, we can see the effect.
And agents in this context are always automatic algorithms, and agents are not people that behave by the same rules?
Excellent question. In game theory and economy, when you say agent or player, you can mean a firm, you can mean a country, you can mean a person, you can be whatever. Anything that makes a decision and takes action, that's an agent or a player. In machine learning, when you say agent, you basically mean an algorithm that computes something. Yes, yes, yes. And there is a whole terminology that is kind of parallel but not exactly the same. We say strategy, they say policy. But yes, there is some correspondence between these things. Yes.
So is it people at the end, or is it machines, or it can be any of those?
Oh, it's machines that were programmed.
Programmed, yeah, okay. Very, very interesting. So any questions at this point? Yes?
Thank you. Actually, that reminds me of an example of like platform capitalism. It's like in China, because I'm from China, there's really a lot of like delivery services, and they have the like timing system for the delivery person. For example, if they can do like at an average time of 8 minutes, then the system will automatically think that you can do it in 8 minutes, and it will tell its users that if he cannot deliver the thing you want in 8 minutes, then you'll be compensated. And what does the money come from? It comes from they will just take the money from the delivery person's salary, so that it means a loss for them. And that comes to like question between the efficiency and the like profit of the company and social justice for those delivery persons, because due to this really strict restriction on time, they're facing more and more like car accidents, or there's speeding problems. So I think that's a problem that maybe we can touch.
Yeah, sounds interesting. Sounds interesting indeed. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I will follow up on a related topic. So even though the four of us, at least, are from hard sciences, so we are looking at two mathematicians, a physicist and a computer scientist, okay? And yeah, and even our understanding of what is a model versus what is a model versus what is a model is totally different. So if we ask a biologist, it's a mouse, okay? If you ask probably a social scientist, it's difficult to define, but something else compared to our interpretations here. And this comes to my questions. We are working in an interdisciplinary field, which offers lots of opportunities, but it is also comes with a set of challenges. What are your thoughts of where is this trade-off? How much time does one need to invest in this building a common vocabulary to then be able to be productive in an interdisciplinary field as computational social science?
So if the question is about how much time, I think that's up on anyone who wants to participate in that research specifically. I think that the way to do that is actually to go into the details of what you are discussing with people, no? So by which I mean that of course we all know, we all have specific terminology, as you were saying before. At the end, when we go to, I don't know, for example, in my field, when you go to the code, for example, then everyone understands, because that is a shared language you have.
Pedro, how long have you been in this interdisciplinary world?
For 4 or 5 years. So I think that in the end you need to constantly balance between the both extremes, because you need sometimes to leverage, to rally energies at a very localized and specialized level, and at the same time you might need otherwise in other spheres to appeal to larger audiences and mobilize different forces. So I think that it's in this kind of research this is essential, and it's not only a matter of personal effort, it's also a matter of institutional, how you approach these institutions. For example, everyone working in multidisciplinary fields knows what it is to address comments from reviewers that are arriving at the same time but with different disciplinary perspectives. So the question of the institutions that are driving this kind of science are very important. Journals, calls for projects, labs, universities, etc. So I would say that it stretches over these two extremes personally, but also at the level of individual institutions too.
Institutions.
During the summer, I was giving a presentation describing the theoretical result that we have connecting multi-agent reinforcement learning, and it was in a conference of economists, actually here in Paris at the Sorbonne. And I was giving the presentation, and I saw that some people just don't understand what I'm talking about. I could see it in their eyes. They didn't know what and eventually I said, okay, what's going on? They said, but do the players know their actions? Yes. Do they know the payoffs? Yes. So what is it that they learn? Well, because learning in econ means something completely different from reinforcement learning. Learning in econ means there is some piece of information that I don't currently have, and I might do things so that I know something more about it. While reinforcement learning means I might know everything about the game, but I still don't know how to play. So yes, it does communicating, even once you have results, communicating them to different audiences requires some considerations of their terms.
I would congratulate on your talk specifically, which is the furthest probably away from what we are used to see, and you did an excellent job keeping us entertained with. And without slides. It's like, I think that everybody appreciates the without slides here. Let's move a little bit more towards data science, analyzing media. We've been spoiled in the last few years by having access to the Twitter API and having this opportunity to sense the pulse of society in real time, now casting on every topic. This came to an end. It's an end of an era, feels to me. How does it feel to you, and what are the steps forward? Pedro.
It feels normal. It feels good to be reminded that we must not stay spoiled too long. So I think it's completely normal. It's long overdue. I think that what we ought to do is to try to set up different incentives so that we can foster the energies and the collaborative energies that we can master in addressing this. For example, of course, I'm talking about DSA, how we can organize at country level through regulators to ask for the data. This will require a lot of coordination effort, right? If you're a regulator and you have a bunch of universities talking different languages, different disciplinary languages, I mean, it's going to require some effort. But there's also a lot to be done, and I hear a lot less about this in coordination at European level between research and industry, for example. So I don't see why this would not see or foster further the emergence of an industry catering to the need for researchers to understand this, for example, kind of ecosystems, right? In which we can focus the researches we have, the resources we have, in this, in the economic logic of research that comes through proposals, but it's sometimes, oftentimes unable to meet these challenges, for example, in the framework of a single project, why we could not see the emergence of an industry economic situation in Europe, country-wise or continental-wise, in which we can address this, for example, companies catering to social media collection data, for example.
Interesting. Do you have something to add? No? So, right now, we have these big social media companies which have the complete monopoly on the data that we all produce. We all contribute data, and they have this monopoly. As researchers, it's even difficult to monitor the influence, to see what are they doing. We've all heard about a few extreme cases, how this can be used and misused for some purposes. Without having the access to the data, we might even not know that things are being misused. So in the sense of we have the privacy of an individual, we have the rights of the company, we have the researcher with curiosity and service to a society, and we have the ideas of open data, open society, reproducibility of experiments. So it's difficult to align all of these goals. Do you see, like, what's the way forward here?
Yeah, in my perspective, and I'm sure you also know about that, so individuals can donate data. So a solution from our side as researchers is directly also communicating with people, because at the end, if we make them aware of the, of the pros and how research is useful for society, instead of, having this industry which necessarily we have to, pass by if you want to gather data, that could be an option, making it easier to for people to donate the data, and maybe making people more aware of the fact that research can help society of a whole, and I think that's an option, and I am sure that at CEU you are going toward that. I know Julia has done a lot extensive work on this.
Then there comes questions with representativeness. So you've mentioned your representativeness. Twitter by itself was not super ideal, but there were means of dealing with that. How can data from people who explicitly choose to donate be considered representative? Like there's many obstacles. I know I'm opening more questions that we can answer in this panel. How are we doing? Okay. Lots of social media research is done reflecting the simplified way of the United States. There is just left and right. There is just Democrats and Republicans. Everything is in English. And many of these things don't really reflect directly the European situation, when there is not just bipolar, but we've heard many poles. Not just one language, many languages. Within languages, there's dialects there's many things. There's lots of diversity, and not everybody uses the same media. Social media made in Europe. What should be done? So we've heard of your project and initiatives using this multitude of dimensions and not being limited to the simplistic two. Should we do more? What should be like next steps to be able to mirror the society to what? Like to see, to be able to measure the society? Do we have any ideas on that?
So I think that we are all going to the US because it's easier to do. I feel that also in your field, that zero-sum game, it's something that probably spurs from that field. No? You have a position, you have the opposite one, and so it's more complicated, I think. That's gonna come, I think, also, no? And what Pedro did is probably one good approach.
Yeah, so what you say is essential. So we've been spoiled too, in a sense. But we can ask questions. So we can ask more. So we are imposing more through regulation, but through regulation too, we can help foster an economic ecosystem. I'm not talking about why there are not unicorns on social media in Europe. I'm talking about the technical constraints they would have to see in their emergence to respect some of the value that we're imprinting in the upcoming regulation, right? So as GDPR, DSA. So we are not used to thinking on, for example, social media in which we can own data, or social media in which we can do this kind of research in which we can understand society through, for example, examining as people's position, but without compromising GDPR. Whereas in fact, while forgetting this, we are closing sometimes opportunities in which we can overcome this. For example, why not a future in which there is social media that is doing differential privacy, for example, by default in providing data for researchers, for example. Technologies that implied math and computer science that could noise the data and be open, completely open, for example. So opening the social field, opening an economic viability, addressing the questions of rights to privacy. So these are the kind of questions that being spoiled hinders, in a sense, I think.
That's great. Those are all great ideas, and I hope that you wrote them down. So there will be more opportunities to discuss later today. We are heading for a poster session soon. There is a dinner and there's a full day tomorrow. I think that we all have lots of ideas and lots of opportunity for collaborating and discussing further. So I would like to thank our speakers again. And we are closing this session now. Thank you.